Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question...
Hey, does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
Hey, my name's Megan.
And I'm Steve. You see what I did there? That's called ad-libbing.
Yeah, I got that. And today it does show people that we do say it every time. It's not just a recording. Today we are talking about Camp Nowhere, the 1994 live action film.
Yep. And
this is our summer pick. We just talked about Salute Your Shorts last episode, and this episode we're doing Camp Nowhere, so 2 camp-themed things.
Yeah.
You can find Camp Nowhere on Disney+. And if you don't have Disney+, you can rent it or buy it on Amazon Prime. But before...
our non-sponsored snack review.
Right. So today, we're keeping with the dirt camp theme. Last time we had dirt. This time we have...
gummy worms.
Gummy worms. All right. Now, these are, I don't want to say not legitimate gummy worms. They're not the most famous kind. Because the most famous kinds that I found, here, take a couple. You see how they're a little bit smaller? All of the ones that I found.
These are babies.
Yeah, all the ones that I found, like the typical gummy worms, were made with wheat glucose syrup. And obviously I can't have those. So these are Albanese World's Best. They are made in the USA and not Albania, as the name implies.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit of history. That's watermelon.
That's pretty good. You can't have any, Lucy.
Our dog came up immediately as soon as we opened the package. We have a really professional studio here. So... gummy candy has been popular since 1864.
Wow, that's pretty far.
Friars of Lancashire made Lancashire. I'm sorry to our UK listeners for butchering that. But they made this gelatin-based candy called Unclaimed Babies. Then,
wow.
I think like Jelly Babies.
That's
or
dark.
No. Yeah, that is, now that I think of the name of it. But that is what they called it. Then in the 1920s, Hans Riegel of Germany, he was from Bonn, and he started the Haribo Company. H-A for Hans, R-I for Riegel, and B-O-N, or B-O for Bonn.
Okay.
Haribo.
And that's where we get the gummy bears.
And that is what started Gummy Bears. So he was kind of a poor confectionery and decided to go out on his own. Decided that they needed something different.
Right.
Oh. That's an interesting...
pineapple is mine, I think.
I was going to say mango. Yeah, we both looked at each other and ate kind of a weird flavor. But we're not eating the same color.
No, you're not in my mouth.
No. Well, not right now. Oh. So, at any rate, Haribo Company, he wanted something different. He started playing around with different... soft gelatin candy, and at that time the teddy bear was really popular. The teddy bear came out in 1902, around the time he started his company, but he came up with the idea of the gummy bear in about 1922.
Okay. He was like, hey, maybe bears instead of unclaimed children.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. So so it's a German candy initially, and then the gummy worm was another German confectionery company, Trolli, and they basically, in 1981, so about 60 years after the gummy bear, they came up with the gummy worm. They wanted something that would appeal to kids that parents would be like, oh, that's...
right.
It's a little weird. But that's crazy to me because again, this is like, what's the other candy that we talked about that was from the 80s?
Oh, it was Big League Chew.
Yeah, like Big League Chew, right? It's about that same time, but because this was when we were like so little, like too little even to eat candy, it's just something that I thought had been around forever. So,
gummy worms.
Yeah, when I initially did the research, I figured that it would maybe be like 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
But it really is something just started in our generation, which is interesting to me.
We see the long evolution between babies to bears to worms.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all sorts of different ones, right? There's like fruit rings and all of that. But I think the gummy bear and the gummy worm are kind of the enduring, like probably they're the biggest selling of all the types.
Yeah. And then they use those, like you said, the rings, the things like that, to sprout off into other things. Other places used them as the base kind of model. Like in a few weeks, we're going to do Sour Patch Kids.
Right.
Which is kind of a gummy, but then with sour stuff on the outside.
Yeah, and also a lot of the fruit slices had that same grainy stuff on the outside of them as well. Like the gummy fruit. I don't like those. So, that's a little bit of history about the gummy worm, where they came from.
Awesome.
And we are back at camp, but last time we already raided out of cabins. What are we going to do this time? All right, it's a camp, so we're going to go pine trees.
Okay.
All right. If you haven't joined us before, 1 out of 5 for the stackle. The last snack, I gave it a 10.
Yeah,
I got confused. 1 out of 5 pine trees for the stack. 1 out of 10 for the show.
Yep.
So,
or the movie, yes.
The movie in this case, yeah. So what are you going to give gummy worms?
You know, I like gummy worms, but they're nothing like fantastic.
Yeah.
They're kind of average. So I'm going to go with a 3 because, like, I like them better than Smarties and, like, some, as you know, there's certain candies that are just not my jam. But, you know, I would sit down and eat gummy worms. Like, I just enjoyed a handful myself. But they're not, like, they don't wow me.
Yeah.
Right? So probably a 3.
I feel kind of the same way. I think as kids, especially when these first came out, they're supposed to be kind of a gross out factor. Like, you'd pull them in between you and somebody else, see how far they could stretch, especially on a hot day like today. But I don't really... I like some other, like, gummy fruit snacks. Like, Welch's does, like, a really good fruit snack.
Yes.
You know? I never really liked gummy bears or gummy worms. I'm going to give it a 2.
I'm a Swedish fish fanatic.
Right.
Which is also a gummy of some sort.
But that has a different consistency, and it's more opaque as well. These are kind of see-through. I also, this particular brand, no offense to this brand, again, it's to me, it's just not my thing. The flavors were kind of weird. There's like watermelon, pineapple, raspberry, like... just cherry, lemon, and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess
some basics.
Yeah, some more basics. So, yeah, 2.5 pine trees out of 5.
Out of 5.
Yeah, it's not 10. It's 2.5 pine trees out of 5 for our snack. But kind of neat to know where it comes from. Okay, so let's get a summary of Camp Nowhere.
Okay, so again, for those of you who haven't heard us before, right now I'm going to give a very, very brief summary, and then after Megan talks about the history and fun facts, and we take a quick commercial break, we're going to come back and then kind of do a deep dive. Mm-hmm. So, brief summary of Camp Nowhere. This is a movie about a small group of kids who are sort of sick of their parents shipping them off to summer camp.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit last week about summer camp, and how kids used to go to a lot. This actually is kind of a transition, because last week we talked about kids that just went to regular summer camp. Mm-hmm. This is more, like we said, nowadays a lot of the camps tend to be more specific.
Right.
And so, like, the main character, Morris Mudd, is like, he gets shipped off to computer camp. There's another kid whose dad sends him to military camp. A girl who goes to fat camp, who doesn't need to go to fat camp.
We'll talk about that.
And then another girl who goes to acting camp.
Right.
And they're just kind of sick of going and spending the summer in this place where they don't know anybody. They have this, these strict agendas. And so this small group of kids comes up with this idea to convince their parents that they're going to a new camp, collect the money, and then they just, like, hang out together for 8 weeks and don't have to do any of that nonsense.
Right.
And they enlist the help of a former acting teacher, a drama teacher from middle school, who doesn't work there anymore, but he's very good at disguises. and acting, apparently.
Well, very good we'll get into that,
so
too.
So he meets with each set of parents and basically disguises himself and portrays someone running a different type of camp.
Right.
Depending on what they normally go to.
Right.
And convinces the parents to send them off. Of course, after they get this all set and ready to run, a number of other kids hear about it and want in. So in total, there's about 20 or 30 kids, probably.
Yeah, probably about, I would say probably, yeah
who end up on this scheme, and so they basically end up at this old camp that they rent. And they spend the summer there. Fun ensues. So does trouble. They run into some snags, but throughout the summer, they kind of, have to learn to work together a little bit. Then it culminates with Parents' Day, where parents all want to show up. And they have to kind of overcome that major challenge. And then it wraps up at the end, and they kind of learn a lesson. Yeah. So it's really kind of a neat summer campy kind of movie.
And the parents kind of learn lessons too, a little bit, to a certain extent.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's basically that's the movie in a nutshell. Nice summary. Some history and fun facts about Camp Nowhere. This movie, let's start with the cast.
Yes.
This movie has a phenomenal cast. And it is surprising to me how many people who were like stars at the time in other ways ended up being in this movie.
Yeah.
Like
in supporting roles, and then how many kids who ended up being bigger stars later.
Yeah. So, for example, just with the adults, Christopher Lloyd is Dennis.
Yep.
Who sort of the de facto camp counselor, but really a con man, right? Tom Wilson, who was in all three Back to the Future movies with Christopher Lloyd. He played Biff.
Yep.
And Buford Tannen in the one back in the 1800s.
Yep.
He has a role as a sheriff. Then we have Jonathan Frakes, who played Riker on Star Trek.
Yep.
He has a very minor role as a parent. He just has like kind of one line, but he comes in with his real wife, Jeannie Francis.
Yeah.
I don't know how they ended up here.
And
for
it's
a
hilarious
day.
Because this is 94, so he's got the beard. Because
Yeah,
he's a bearded
been
Riker
on Star
already.
Trek.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not like it before Star Trek. Then we have Burgess Meredith, who makes a cameo. He's the guy who owns the camp, who lets them like rent it, and he has this hilarious speech about how it used to be a hippie commune at one point, and Christopher Lloyd's like, I knew I was here before.
Yes.
So they have a fun interaction. I mentioned Kate Mulgrew.
Kate Mulgrew. No, you didn't yet.
Kate Mulgrew plays the mother of Trish, who's supposed to be at Broadway camp.
Yep.
Right? So she has a place.
And of course we know her as Captain Janeway from Voyager, Star Trek Voyager.
Yeah, and was that after this? Voyager was 95, 96
been
maybe?
Around the same time or
but
a little
it's close
after,
to the same. My point is she already had a pretty good career.
So Voyager started in 95, so this is right before she was in Voyager. It probably filmed in 93.
Yeah, it's just funny because Christopher Lloyd was in a Star Trek movie.
Right.
The third one?
Search for Spock.
Right. And then Kate Mulgrew was in Star Trek. And Jonathan Frakes was in Star Trek.
Yes.
So and I actually do have, I forgot in my notes. So Jonathan Jackson, who plays Morris Mudd, the lead kid.
Yep.
He was actually played Lucky Spencer on General Hospital starting in 1993.
Okay.
And Jeannie Francis played his mom on that show. She's married to Jonathan Frakes, so that's why they come in and do a cameo.
Interesting. And Star Trek The Next Generation was in their last season this year. So Jonathan Frakes was probably looking a way to break out.
Yeah, maybe.
Because their last season ended in 94.
Yeah.
So he's probably looking for movie stuff because he knows the show's ending.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
The last adult big name I would say is M. Emmett Walsh is in this.
Okay.
And he played Mr. Polk, the guy who's trying to find the teacher.
Yes.
And he's a huge character actor. He has a long list of movie careers, right? And some of the famous ones you know him from, he was in Harry and the Hendersons. He was in Critters. He was in Christmas with the Cranks.
He plays this type of character a lot, though. Like
He
a
does.
curmudgeonly,
and usually in comedies.
Yeah.
He was also in The Best of Times, which was an awesome movie with Kurt Russell and Robin Williams about guys that go to their high school reunion and try to basically restart their football career.
Yeah, that's an underrated film.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So, so let's talk about the kids. Jonathan Jackson played Morris Mudd. As I said, he was on General Hospital from 93 to 99. And here's the thing that people I think today don't maybe understand how big soap operas were. They had daytime Emmys because there were so many daytime programs that...
Yeah. It was its own categories, basically.
And he won multiple Emmys. He was nominated 6 times. He won the first in 95, and then again in 98, 99.
So he stayed on the show for a while after being a kid. Okay.
He was the youngest actor category. Well, if he started in 93, he probably, let's see when he was born, 82. So he was 11 when he started.
Yeah.
And
so he was 14 when he won his first Emmy.
Yeah, 14 when he won his first Emmy. So he's like the youngest, one of the youngest people to do that. And then he was on that show on and off, like you know how soap opera people are.
Right. Until
2015.
Oh, so they kept him as a recurring character to come back quite some time. Okay.
For quite a number of things. He did a few movies. Tuck Everlasting, he played Jesse Tuck, the one with the girl from Gilmore Girls.
Okay.
He also did a few smaller movies, and he did some episodes of Boy Meets World. And then he was on Nashville from 2012 till 2018, so overlapping with his General Hospital. Yep. He was the main cast on that show.
Oh, okay.
That's a show that I liked. Then I ended up getting rid of TV, and I never got to
never watched that show.
See it. He also has had numerous soundtrack appearances because he's in a band. So he did quite a bit, you know? Then we have Marnette Patterson, who played Trish. And she did, again, some smaller roles. She did, like, Wild Things, American Sniper, Star Troopers 3. Some smaller roles. Gabby was played by Melody Kay. Again,
who didn't really have a long career, I don't think, afterwards.
No, not too many things. Neverending Story 3.
Yeah, that's a directed to video.
Yeah, because some things kind of like that. Then we have Hillary Tuck, who when I was a kid, we'll talk about this more, I thought she was like the coolest in this movie. Hillary Tuck played Betty. And she was in a number of things. She did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show, which ran for a number of years.
Yep.
And she did things like she was in episodes of Roseanne, Boy Meets World, Judging Amy, House, Bones, Ghost Whisperer, like a lot of a character actor, right? Like a working actress, as they say. And then we have this strange kind of tidbit that Andrew Keegan, who some people might remember. What was the thing you remembered him from?
10 Things I Hate About You.
10 Things I Hate About You. He was also in O. So, yeah, 2 Shakespearean derived movies, right? And then was he in Tom and Huck, or was that...
I feel like he played a number of roles in like teenage comedies.
Yeah, they were trying to make him like a heartthrob.
Yeah, in the later 90s.
Right? And basically, he left acting to start what he called the Full Circle Religion.
Oh, interesting.
And that is a church run by a core group of 8 people who take the actor's word as, quote, the ultimate say on all things.
I like that.
You like that? Oh, that's horrifying.
Yeah. So he started a cult.
Yeah. I mean, he calls it a new religion, but let's call a spade a spade. It's a cult.
Yeah.
And that to me is interesting because also in the cast, who has only a couple of lines,
Allison Mack.
Allison Mack.
Our girl from Smallville and sex cults.
And our town that we lived in for a little while. We call her our girl because we have a friend
who lived upstairs
from her, and we lived like about 2 blocks away from what was a huge cult. Yeah. The Nexium cult. It was a mixture of a cult and a multi-level marketing, which aren't all MLMs.
Right. But Allison Mack is very young in this. Yeah. We actually had to pause the movie for a minute and go, oh, that's her right there.
Yep.
But you can make out her signature blonde, very blonde hair. And she has some distinct features facially. And her innocent-looking face that tricked many women into coming into Nexium. She had, like I said, we know her first from Smallville, and she played a great role in that for many years. Mm-hmm. So she had some acting chops a little bit. Yeah. This is before that even. I mean, she's, what would you guess, 13, 14 maybe?
No, I think she's younger.
I thought she was playing young.
No, because she is small-statured. She was born in 82. This is 94, 12. So yeah, 12. Yeah. Just a very small 12. She's supposed to be like a little sister figure for Trish.
Yes.
But she and Trish were basically born the same. I think the girl who played Trish was also born at 80, so she's 14. At any rate, it's also the film debut for Jessica Alba.
Yeah, who's in a lot of same shots with Allison Mack.
Yes, and she doesn't have any lines. Now, she plays Gail, and at one point, Mud Morrison is running through the woods, and he goes, oh, hey, Gail, and she's making out with somebody, and I feel like there were deleted scenes that we didn't get. Like, possibly Gail had more lines.
Did he say...
And it's in the rain. She's in the rain. It's raining, and she's kissing somebody.
Are you sure?
No.
Are you sure he said Gail? Because I thought it was Zach and Trish making out.
No. Because they don't kiss till later.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Because, but they were like some of the older kids in the group, whereas, I mean, like you said, it's the debut of Jessica Alba, and she plays young. She's about the same as Allison Mack.
She does.
Probably like a 12, maybe?
Yeah. So at any rate, I just say it had a great cast. Whether or not the kids went on to do other things, I think the cast is wonderful. It filmed at Disney's famed Golden Oak Ranch. They filmed a lot of things at Golden Oak Ranch because it was an outdoor space that could be kind of used for various things, right? So, parts of Back to the Future Part 3 were filmed there as well. Those are, I don't really have too many fun facts outside of that. I've looked and I couldn't really find anything about why it was made or how it was made or, it's not like based on a book or anything like that. So.
No, and there's not a lot of data on it.
Yeah. But that's a little bit about what the cast did before and after and where it was filmed. So we're going to take a break here and we're going to throw it to our friends at S1E1, another independent podcast that we enjoy. And when we come back, we'll talk about our memories, or lack thereof. And then we will get into our full review and recap.
Hey everyone, Nick here from the S1E1 podcast. Each week, we pick a different sitcom, watch just the first televised episode, and ignoring anything we may know about the future run of that series, decide if it's a show that we want to greenlight or cancel.
We very seriously dissect TV shows for no reason at all.
I gotta pee. Fucking old-timey. I got a Frankenstein at my show. So do I. You know what I'm
you should know, because right now you're dressed like a London DJ. Moving forward, unless there's anything else depressing about my life you want to bring up.
That's impressive to find that many bad shows.
Who's Boner? I don't even know what a Banksy is.
Catch us each week wherever you listen to podcasts and visit us at s1e1pod.com for links to everywhere you can find us.
Okay, welcome back. I am Steve.
I'm Megan.
And we're going to jump into memories. So, Megan, what memories do you have of Camp Nowhere?
So, I picked this movie because, we had Field of Dreams as our other kind of summer pick film. And I felt like that one was geared more toward adults, and I wanted one that was specifically made for kids but not animated.
Right.
And there at this point in time, I think that was a market that was just kind of coming into its own. Like, you had teen movies and you had little kid movies, but kind of like with books, you didn't really have middle grade stuff as much. So Salute Your Shorts that we watched last week, and this are kind of in that same age range. Mm-hmm. And this was a movie that 94, I was kind of like just coming out of that phase, because I would have been 14.
Yeah.
So just kind of coming out of that. My brother's 4 years younger, so he's just coming into that phase of life. So it just kind of hit for both of us at the right time. Like, for me, as kind of the older one in the person in a movie.
Yeah.
And somebody who had already been to camp. Mm-hmm. And for him, kind of like, all these kids, like, when you go to camp, you just have fun and, like, you're free, you know?
Right.
That kind of thing. And I think we saw it at the drive-in initially.
Yeah.
But I wanted to we were talking last time specifically about camp memories, and I wanted to talk more just to kind of explain. So Steve was making fun of me during and then after the show about the fact that I went to an academic camp called Mind Stretchers.
That is true.
Now, I looked it up to see if it was still going on. It was this program at this very small college called Keuka College. And Keuka is on the Finger Lakes. So if you're not from New York State, there are lakes that there are like 5 or 6 of them, but they look like a hand.
Yep.
So they're called the Finger Lakes. Keuka is right on the lake, the college. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think that they have the camp anymore. But I found this girl who wrote a blog, and I just want to read you a little bit of what she said. First, she says, we picked 3 classes. Prior to attending the camp, we had to sign up for 3 classes that we'd take throughout each day. 1 academic, 1 artistic, and 1 athletic. So she took psychology, where she learned about Freud, and acting class, where they would do like acting games, and then soccer.
Right.
I took the 1 year and the other year kind of blend for me, because I went there 2 years in a row. But I took 1 year for my athletic was new games, which was just like fun games that you'd play like at camp, right? Things that they kind of made up.
Yeah. And
then my other year I took fencing, where we learned stage fencing. And it was really fun. And then my artistic, I think the 1 year I did take theater. The other year I took journalism for the artistic.
Okay.
And then I also had the 1 year for my academic class was Shakespeare. And we read Midsummer Night's Dream, and then we put it on as a production. Like, we were still on book, obviously. You're not going to memorize Shakespeare in a week.
Right.
But we put it on as a production. And this is what she says. She talks about a paper that she wrote, and she says, we even had our meals in the dining hall. For some reason, the walk from the dorm to the dining hall always made me feel like an adult. An adult in college, and I felt so cool. To clarify, I was not. I love that, because that is 100% how I felt at the time. Mm-hmm. And in between those classes, we did fun things. Like, there was a camp store. You had to get we had a little like board up in the dorms where we stayed, and you would put which activity you were doing. So if you were going to swimming, if you were going to the lake, if you were going to the swimming, the pool on the college campus, if you were going to do like rec time or whatever, you'd put where you were so that they could keep track of you, which is a horrible system, because you're relying on 13-year-olds to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But we were nerdy 13-year-olds, so for the most part we did. But she said that she ended up staying home for college, so her experience at camp was more like the actual college experience of staying in the dorms and eating in the dining hall and all that kind of thing. And that she realized later It was probably just a giant ploy on behalf of the college admissions team, attempting to allure impressionable kids with fun memories of summer camp in order to go there for
At their college. Yeah, 100%.
I almost went there.
It worked.
Well, yeah, it did. It did. For me, it did. I really almost went there. My reasoning for not, it was a very smaller school, so they have kind of limited majors that you could do. And it was also, for me, a tiny bit too close to home. Now, when you go away to college, if you're a half hour away and you're living in the dorm, you're never going home. Right. But I really wanted to go out of state. And then I ended up getting a scholarship. So that's where I ended up going initially. But I think that, the idea, there's two things I want to say. The first is that these are, for me at least, great memories of all the different summer camps that I went to. I did go to Girl Scout camp, like overnight, like weekends.
Right.
And the Christian camp that I went to for a couple weeks, this camp, the Upward Bound that I talked about. But they were great memories of being a kid and kind of, like you said last time, being with people where there's shared interests. So you're with 12 other kids who voluntarily wanted to read Shakespeare in the summer. In like 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade. So like years beyond when we would actually be reading it in school, right? And the other thing though is, and I think we see it with Camp Nowhere, that you do have this shift of people pressuring kids to do things that will look good later on college applications at younger and younger and younger ages.
Right.
And this is where we start to come into with, I think people a little bit younger than us got this more. Millennials, I think, got it more than we did. Mm-hmm. But helicopter parenting, and you should volunteer because that'll look good on your college application, and you should go to enrichment camp because that'll be good later, and then you'll get into AP classes, and then you'll be able to get into a good college. Right. And away from the idea of camp in the 50s, 60s, 70s of just, you go out and you enjoy nature, and you might learn some wilderness skills, but for the most part, you're having fun.
Right.
Right? And some of my friends later, like, they did go to volleyball camp where it was hardcore volleyball, like, they were training and lifting and playing and learning new skills. Or soccer camp was another one that a couple of my friends went to. So it's those kind of things that I think the kids in this movie are rebelling against. Like, just let us be kids, you know? So I know you didn't see this movie, but what memories did you...
Well, I have seen it.
You have?
Well, once we were watching it, I was like, oh yeah, I think I have seen this before. Mm-hmm. I believe I probably saw it as a rerun somewhere.
Yeah.
Like on TV, because as I'm looking at this, it came out in 94, the summer most likely. I was going into my junior year of high school.
Right.
This would have been a little young for me.
Yeah.
And I was working at summer camp and stuff in that summer, so we didn't watch a lot of movies necessarily because we were busy. But yeah, so it did connect a little bit to me, especially with the end during the Parents' Day situation, which is kind of like one of the climax of the movie. They're trying to run 4 different camps at once. Mm-hmm. So as the parents move, they're like gumming ahead of them and switching the camp over.
Right.
So it's computer or fat camp or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it reminded me when I was program director for a number of years of the camp that I worked at, we would always be visited during the summer by National Boy Scouts who showed up, and they basically walked through and inspected your camp while it was running and basically kind of certified you or gave you like an accreditation.
No pressure.
Right? Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And so they would go and visit all the areas as people were doing, kids were there doing stuff, things like that. And so every year when that happened, I would we'd have 1 or 2 people walking with them, bringing them on tour. and I would run ahead to the next area and be like, make sure you're ready. Like, national, they're on their way. They're coming to your area. And I had because in my job as a program director, I oversaw all the program areas.
Right.
Right. So, swimming, boating, scout skills, which is knots and fire building.
Right.
Right. Sports, archery, BBs, nature, crafts. Right. We had all these, so probably like 8 or 9 areas. Mm-hmm. And I just spent the day running one area ahead of the group, prepping the next group for the visit. And it reminded me a little bit of what they were doing.
Yeah.
And we'd be on radios to people and be like, where are they? Where are they going? So that kind of was pretty funny.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so great memories of camp. Yeah. Maybe not specifically of this movie, but great memories of camp. And all right, so I'm just picturing you running around like that. Sorry. So let's get into our full review and recap. So we start. At first, I want to say, just as a general note, this movie was completely different from what I remember it.
Well, it's been a long time.
It's been
30 years.
Yeah, I don't think that I remember liking it, and I don't remember renting it, or, like you said, on TV, but you catch bits of it. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've seen it in full, since then. I remember it. I thought that it was more like with Salute Your Shorts, where we saw the interactions between the kids. There's so much Christopher Lloyd in this movie.
Yeah.
It really does star him. I mean, he has the starring billing, but I figured that they did that when we were doing the movie. I figured they did that because he's the adult and he had a well-known name.
Yeah.
But it really is more his...
it's between him and Mud.
It's a lot more of scenes between him and Mud trying to pull off the scam.
Yeah.
Than it is between the kids themselves.
Yes.
And that, anyway, well, yeah, so let's talk about the opening.
So the thing I was going to say is the initial... The opening section of this movie is what I called the initial scam, which is when Mud, Zach, Gabby, and Trish all basically are complaining they don't want to go to camp again and that they hate the camps they go to. And so they come up with the idea to basically trick their parents.
Yeah, so the 4 camps are Camp Broadway,
mm-hmm.
Camp Slenderella, a camp for military that I didn't catch the name of, but they make fun of it later.
Yeah.
But my favorite is Camp Micro Chippewa.
That's of course the computer camp, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and we have Mud breaking the 4th wall to say, I'm in hell.
Yes.
And then Christopher Lloyd later breaks the 4th wall as well. So we have that happening, but just twice. It's not like a motif that happens throughout
not
the
at all.
film, which was weird to me. Camp Slenderella, here's the issue. First of all, fat camps don't work. They can be places where kids get bullied. They can also sometimes be places where kids who go there actually feel more comfortable because everybody's overweight, right? But here's the thing. This girl is like a size 2.
Melody Kay, who plays Gabby, is not even chunky.
No. She doesn't even have a round face.
They stick her in bulky clothes.
Yeah.
And then put her in more form-fitting clothes later when she has lost weight during the movie.
Yeah. And her mom, later on, her mom's like, "Oh, you're svelte." And we're like, "She looks the same."
No, but they've got her in a more form-fitting
I know, but
shirt.
It's very clear that
she's not a chunky girl at all.
She is wearing a skirt in the first scene where you can see her legs, and she's just got on a big jean jacket.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. Anyway.
So they decide to pull in Dennis Van Welker, who is played by Christopher Lloyd, and is an ex-drama teacher. And he basically goes around, as we mentioned before, and does these little pitches at each of their parents' house.
Yeah, but Mud kind of becomes enamored with him because he's selling this Cheese Whiz product.
But he can tell that he can sell it to anybody. Basically.
But what's funny to me, this is this is adult eyes watching a kid film. because this was supposed to be funny. It's not.
No, it's not really.
And he's like, oh, and check this out. And he like waggles his eyebrows.
Yeah, he's selling Cheese Whiz.
Yeah. And
But-
to an adult, you're like, oh my God,
But-
whatever.
but
He's
as-
just vamping.
But after they pull him in and he goes around and does his little
that is funny.
his little
That part's
skits,
funny.
right? And he disguises himself, things like that, plays different parts. This introduces us to what I classify as possibly the greatest character in the movie, and the movie relies on the most, which is Christopher Lloyd's physical comedy.
Yes. That's true.
Most of the movie is carried in a number of places by Christopher Lloyd's physical comedy.
Yeah, so he dresses up to go to Mud's house, and he puts on, like, a Cosby sweater.
Just like Mud's dad wears.
Yes, and glasses.
And a fake mustache.
And also, I didn't catch until the middle of the movie that the fake name he's given is Mr. Wozniak.
Yes.
Because it's a computer camp.
Right.
And then he dresses up like a Vietnam vet.
To pitch to the
To
military
Zach's,
camp.
right,
Yep.
to Zach's father to pitch the military camp. Then he dresses up like Richard Simmons.
Yeah, it's a complete Richard Simmons knockoff for the fat camp. I mean, voice, like fake afro, everything.
And
is
the rainbow.
the rainbow leotard he's wearing.
And the short shorts.
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
spot
I'm
on.
like crying right now from laughing. It's just such a good impression. Oh man, and Richard Simmons, by all accounts, is like now a recluse, but
Yeah.
a really lovely person. But this impression is hilarious.
It's hilarious. I found the whole movie hilarious in this aspect with Christopher Lloyd, okay? Christopher Lloyd has always been a physical comedian. I mean, a lot of his comedy in Back to the Future
Yeah,
is physical,
it is.
is
That's
Doc Brown. But he is really expanding it in this movie.
Yeah,
Because he's playing multiple people almost in these different guises that he has to put
and
on.
what's fascinating too is the range. We talked about this with Quantum Leap, where you have to be playing yourself, playing the person.
Right.
So it's really difficult for actors to do that because you have to put on the layer that's the front for the parents, but also retain the core of the character that you're being for the kids.
Yes.
Right? And there's other instances where I've seen this kind of people try to do it and they can't pull it off. But it's pulled off really well in this section. Really, really well. And then, of course, he goes as the Broadway guy, and he's talking about how she'll be in all these different plays, and Kate Mulgrew's like, well, I just don't know. And the dad is like, she'll be gone for 8 weeks?
Yeah.
Which was so
Yeah,
sad.
he's like, well, it's 2 weeks longer than your previous camp you used to. And the dad's like, that means 2 more weeks in Europe.
Yeah.
Like, you could tell the dad just wants her off his hands.
Oh, big time. And also keeps getting her confused with her sister.
Yes.
And it's not her stepdad, by the way.
Yeah, it's her real dad.
It's her
He
real
just doesn't
father.
care.
He just doesn't care. So it's quite funny. Then we have the scene with Burgess Meredith.
Yeah, where they rent the camp.
And it used to be a hippie commune.
Yes.
And he says, This is right here is where I was when it was a hippie commune. And Mud goes, right here, and Christopher Lloyd goes, and he moves over like about 8 inches.
Yeah.
It's such a good gag again. And then, all right, my favorite, Betty. So
Yes.
Mud's best friend, Mud's best friend figured out what was going on with this camp. Because he's very smart. He's also a computer geek.
Yeah.
And he told his crush Betty, because there's a rumor that she at camp went skinny dipping.
Right. So he wants her to go to fake camp with him.
Except that Betty has a big mouth. And she shows up with all the kids behind her. And she's like, hey, Mud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they end up having to spread this gag to about 20 to 30 kids. Which moves us into kind of the second piece, which is moving into camp.
Yeah.
It then jumps to them. Mud says something like, we're going to need a bus.
Yes.
And it jumps to like this old rental bus, basically dropping them all off at camp.
And the first thing they do is put a bunch of mattresses outside a roof and run off the roof and jump onto the mattresses.
Yeah, they go kind of crazy, because of course they're really... I mean, Christopher Lloyd's character, Dennis, goes with them.
Well,
But he's staying in his own cabin, kind of like on the other side of the property and is really not parental guidance.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that this is where the character actor that you mentioned before, he's been chasing Christopher Lloyd.
Yes, yeah.
So he's basically a repo guy. There's a yellow gremlin, very distinct car, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's trying to repossess it or get the money for all the missed payments. We also have the sheriff kind of come into play because he's always out just eating and reading a book because it's a very sleepy town normally.
Yes.
And then there's all these reports of kids everywhere running around getting into trouble.
Yeah.
So he's kind of trying to figure that out.
The kids use a lot of the money to buy TVs and toys and bikes and dirt bikes and snacks.
Yeah, but before that, we see kind of the problem that Mud is in, where he wanted to just be a kid this summer, and he finds himself laying out the ground rules. Number one, they have to write letters home once a week. Mm-hmm. Number two, in town, just pretend you don't speak English.
Yeah, if anyone talks to you, you don't speak English.
Number three, if there's a Taco Bell anywhere in town, let him know.
Right.
Which is a throwaway joke. And then the planes go overhead.
Yeah, because they're near an Air Force base.
But that never pays off either. That's the only... It's twice that gag is used and never again.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny.
It's used during the Parents' Day.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. So there is a payoff eventually. And then they have this Lord of the Flies moment where they're plugging in a TV and this one girl goes, "If I don't see Dylan, I'll die." Which is funny because I think that was the girl who plays Betty, and she was in 90210 a couple episodes. But they have a bonfire where they throw the diet shakes, the books of Rogers and Hammerstein, the computer DOS manual for programming, and then somebody says, "Throw in the cello."
Yeah, and they throw in this $1,000 cello.
And I'm like, from a kid's perspective, I probably didn't get that. Like, you just have an instrument, and a lot of times it's from your school. Mm-hmm. As an adult, I'm like, that cello, the least amount of money that cello is $600. It's probably closer to $1,200. Don't throw the cello in the bonfire. Also, you're going to get bored on rainy days. You could just play your cello for fun. Just enjoy that cello. Then they play some flashlight tag. But you're right. Yeah, so we have this thing. Mud has all the money. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants some of the money. And then they go nuts. And it's like a parade. It's before Amazon.
Yeah, but they have like delivery trucks dropping off toys and TVs and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, TVs, Nerf guns, electric guitars. We threw away the cello, but we got an electric guitar.
Yeah, it's the same kid.
Yeah.
Because he grabs it out of the back of a truck and goes, "Now this beats a cello."
Yeah. Trish and Zach are doing some big time flirting. Mud and Gabby are kind of friend awkward flirting a little bit. So we get a little bit of character development. This is the point. So as a 13, 14-year-old watching this, I thought it was really cute. As an adult watching this, I don't want to watch 12-year-old kids flirt with each other. Or 14-year-old kids. It's so awkward. And they kind of have Andrew Keegan's character, Zach, be like... He's kind of like a leader. Mud is like an underdeveloped... He hasn't really hit puberty yet. Mm-hmm. He's the same age as Andrew Keegan's character. But Andrew Keegan acts more like an older kid. And he's always talking about how he's going to drop out of school. And I'm like, you're 14.
Well, he has this bully reputation, even though he's not really a bully.
He's not really a bully, yeah.
But he's got a reputation of it, so all the kids kind of respect, like, they listen to him.
Right. And Trish is kind of the most popular girl in school.
Yeah.
Although Betty seems to me like the really cool one. I don't know. She wears hats. I had
and
hats.
Nothing to swim, apparently.
Well, yeah.
Based off the rumors.
Well, what's funny though is when they finally go to show. So now we're kind of coming into the bit where they're at the camp. They've moved in. They're there. So Betty, they're at the beach and like on rafts around, kind of bobbing around the dock, and Betty is there and she's got like an umbrella over her and like she's completely covered up, and I think part of that is the joke that she swam naked.
Yeah.
But part of it is that she's a redhead.
Yeah.
She needs
And Mud's friend, I think his name's Walter,
Yes, Walter.
like continuously is trying to get her to go swimming.
Oh yeah, big time.
Because he's just hoping to get her skinny dipping with him.
Yeah.
Not that he this is a kid that goes to computer camp too. Would not know what to do with a girl doing skinny dipping.
No, he really wouldn't. He just has this idea that would be cool.
Yeah.
And that's probably something he's heard about.
Yeah.
The other thing is that he never says it directly, so it's not exactly like he's not exactly sexually harassing her, but she knows what's up.
Yeah.
And she's annoyed by it.
Yeah, he's like, "Hey, don't you want to go swimming?" And she's like, "No, I don't want to go swim."
She's like, "No, I do not want to go swimming." Like like stop asking me to go swimming. It's just kind of funny. Yeah, but they're doing kind of messing around stuff that I would think in real life kids might be bored after like 2 weeks.
No, the interesting part is they get bored.
Yeah.
Right? There's a one point where it's raining and they're stuck indoors and they've pretty much become bored of most of their toys.
But before that, they have a competition and he gets injured, and that's how...
Oh, yeah, he gets hurt. He gets hurt during 4th of July.
He gets hurt because he tapes Roman candles
to his helmet.
To a helmet and skateboards down the ramp to do, like, a dive. They're doing, like, a dive competition.
And he falls over, and the Roman candle burns his arm.
So he goes to Dennis's cabin. Dennis wants to take him home, but instead he talks him into taking him to this doctor. And this doctor and Dennis start like a little romance, but he's a con artist. So everything he's telling, it's like he's catfishing her.
Yeah.
Everything he's telling her is a lie.
She's a cute lady, but she is the dumbest doctor I've ever seen in my life. She's nice.
She's, bless her heart.
But bless her heart, yeah, she's just not overly bright.
Also, randomly, when he goes to Dennis's... Oh, this is... Yeah. So, then the rain happens and he goes to Dennis again.
Yeah.
Dennis, in real life, would be like, leave me alone.
Yeah, Dennis is just trying to live his best life out in a cabin.
Yeah.
He's getting paid $1,000 for this over the summer. And this kid keeps coming to him and being like, hey, we need help again.
But when he comes in, he's listening randomly to Winston Churchill. Records of Winston Churchill.
Yeah. And he says, who's this? And he says, it's Winston Churchill. Well, because he was theater, right? And he says, it's Winston Churchill, who is like the Jimi Hendrix of speakers, right? Of orators. And the kid Mud goes, who's Jimi Hendrix? And he goes, the Michael Jordan of guitar players. Yeah. So he makes like a double metaphor. It's pretty hilarious.
It's also, that's a baby boomer joke for the parents in the audience.
Yeah.
Right? So he comes out and they do mud games, which we did all the time at camp.
They do like rain. They do like Olympics out in the rain.
We did that all the time. We would hook up whenever it rained. We would set up like a mega slip and slide. Mm-hmm. And there was not a big incline, but a tiny bit of an incline, and we'd go off of that into the mud.
Yeah.
We would do a thing where the kids would like paint. Tempera paint on each other or on the counselors, and then we go out in the rain and like let it wash off. And
this brought up one of my big questions. With the concept here, who's doing their laundry?
Yeah,
because they're there for 8 weeks. We don't see any washers or dryers. This is a very old camp that they rented.
Yeah,
and like when I was at camp, like every week or two, we went home to do laundry because you didn't bring 8 weeks of clothes with you. Or the people who were too far from home, like, went into town to find a laundromat. Like, you had to do wash.
I don't know. I can't remember how we did.
Well, you got to camp at a college, so you
No, but when I was at the Christian camp, I was there the entire summer. I think that we had... I think that we had a laundry on camp, because we had to wash all the, like, the sheets from the... Mm-hmm. Bunk beds and all that.
Okay.
So I think that's how we ended up doing it.
Okay.
But this is a good question, because another question, practical, that comes up: where are they getting food? Because they've spent all their money on toys and guitars.
Well, at one point we see Gabby making food.
Right, and it's very clear.
But they bought a lot of food in like snack junk food when they bought the toys.
Yeah. But that would also not last 8 weeks for most kids.
Well,
right?
It's hilarious because we see Gabby is making food. She's making sandwiches. And she, of course, was supposed to go to fat camp, and she didn't want to eat any diet food. But she ate so much junk food that she's sick of it now and wants to eat better food.
Which is really the idea behind intuitive eating.
Yeah.
That that diets don't work and that you should just eat what you want and eventually you'll get to your set point. I have not found that to work. I have found that for me at least, if you have kind of an issue with like sugar, you're never going to get sick of that. That's never going to go away for you. But it does for her at any rate. I know other people who says it works for them, so whatever. But yeah, I thought that this thing with them trying to entertain themselves was interesting as well, because they do have help from Dennis, but I think that this is just at the cusp of the beginning of the internet, 94, and that took a lot of that away. Electronics took a lot of like entertaining yourself and going outside and coming up with like, now we're going to do Greco-Roman wrestling. Now we're going to do synchronized swimming in the mud.
Yeah.
I also did synchronized swimming one year, so that was a fun scene to see because you don't usually hear about synchronized swimming. But then, at any rate, Mud's trying to tell them that they have to write home. And he's like, here's what we did at the fam camp this week. And nobody's listening to him. And he yells, stop doing that. You'll poke your eye out. And then he's like, oh my God, I'm becoming my father. And you can have that realization at 40, but when you have it at 12,
yes,
it's like a moment of crisis.
As sort of the leader, he's been put in a position where he feels responsible for all these kids now, and he's not having any fun. He's running the camp, basically.
Right.
And so he goes off to sit in the bus that he's camping in, and that's when Gabby comes to comfort him.
And they have the most awkward interaction that I did not want to watch.
They sort of flirt, but not really. Then they agree that when they both grow older and get out of their weird phase, that they won't date like jerks and bullies and like just kind of like popular girls, but they'll date people like one another.
They'll date each other, and they're like, people like us.
Yeah,
Daddy J.
Yeah, he says we could date each other, and she lights up.
Oh, yeah, big
and
time.
He's like, I mean, people like us.
Because it's too much for him.
And then they shake hands and do a long touch.
But also he tells her, a lot of girls start out kind of lumpy like you, but eventually they get chests. And he's like, I don't...
Yeah.
Okay, here's why I didn't want to watch this. I know that you, as a young man, had game. When did you first go on a date?
Middle school.
Right, so like 6th grade, 7th or whatever.
Yeah, somewhere that age.
Okay, I did not. And this is so uncomfortably close to reality. This was the most real conversation in the entire movie. It seems ridiculous. It is not, okay? When you are very awkward and a nerd and you have a friend and you're like, we kind of like each other, but we don't understand social cues of how to navigate this, right? It's awful. Oh my God. It was like cringeworthy, and not in like a funny Office or like Larry David kind of way. Right. Just like honest cringe, awful. Then we see the opposites with Zach and Trish, who Allison Mack is homesick, and she wants to make a necklace.
Even though Zach's a bully, he's trying to take her mind off it. So he's like, "Do you want to help me with a carburetor?" Because he's working on a car, and she's like, "No." She's like a 12-year-old girl with a stuffed animal. Yeah. And he's like, "How about?" He said, "Like, how about riding a dirt bike?" She's like, "No." And she's like, "Do you know how to make necklaces?" And he was like,
"All right,
I guess." And he gets like car parts, and he's like, "Pick which ones of these you like. We'll make a necklace tomorrow." And so, of course, Trish sees this and sees his sweet like interaction with this girl.
And also in the background, Linger is playing.
Yes. And she's like, that was really sweet. And she's trying to be nice. And of course he has to ruin it because he's sitting on the floor below her, and he looks up and she's in sweatshirts and a jean. Yeah. Or jeans and a sweatshirt. He looks up and goes, if you were wearing a skirt right now, I'd be in heaven.
Well, he intentionally tries to muff it, I think, because he is awkward just like Mud, but in a different way. Right. So it's clear that he's not got the skills either, right?
And she says, that's kind of immature, isn't it?
Yeah, and then
So-
she makes her move. She's like, I'm not afraid of you because you think you're a tough guy and you're actually not. And then they do kissing.
Yes, that's true.
Which was still awkward because they're 14 and you're like, I don't want to watch 14-year-olds kiss. So weird. Even though in real life, I think Andrew Keegan is older than I am. I'm like, it's still, I don't like this. So at any rate, we have another scene with the doctor. She flirts more with Christopher Lloyd. And then we come to what was as a kid my favorite part of the movie, the big con.
Yes, the big con. They find out the parents are coming, so they have to put on a Parents' Day.
Yes. And the doctor finds out that Christopher Lloyd's character has been lying to her and is like, well, okay. And just kind of
dumbest doctor
just kind of goes with it and is like, I like you and you're all right by me.
Yeah.
And
she's like, that's not okay. These kids need guidance. If these kids are alone for a night, they'll get sick or injured. And I'm like, that's not necessarily true. But I mean, you do have to watch out for kids, right? But the fact that they're alone for a night doesn't mean that they're going to get ill. Like, that has nothing to do with, like, disease, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But then then he's like, if it makes you feel any better, I'll let you examine every kid. And I'm like, that doesn't seem legal. Right? He doesn't have the ability to sign her off as a doctor to examine children.
I wonder if there's some deleted scenes because it kind of comes to a head with her. And then that storyline is just kind of dropped and they're just dating. But
yes.
I wonder if there was a deleted scenes where, like, even a montage where all the kids are lined up and she's, like, got a thermometer. You know what I'm saying? And it would be funny if she was like, yup, you got a cut that's infected. Yup, you sprained your ankle.
Right.
Like, that would have been kind of funny, like, to acknowledge that. But we don't really get any kind of scene like that. But
so
the parents are coming.
The kids are ready to give up.
Mud tells Zach to shut the F up.
Yeah, the kids are ready to give up. They're like, we can't do this. We can't outsmart our parents. And all the kids are just giving up, including Zach. And Mud, who's never really heard, finally is like, shut up, Zach!
Yeah.
And kind of steps up for himself.
And the drama teacher is just watching from the back because he told Mud that the most important thing in drama was to speak your lines so people could hear them.
Right.
So Mud kind of learns not just being the grunt work person who's doing the right thing all the time, but he learns how to be a leader.
Yes.
And Zach kind of learns how to be a better leader because he can show that he supports Mud and he's a good guy and people still listen to him, but he doesn't have to act like a bully or pretend to be a bully to be a leader of that group, right? But this is so great. The military camp, the Broadway camp, the fat camp, and the computer camp, they're all having
They
Parents'
stage them like 2 hours apart, and they just, like as I mentioned earlier, they're basically going in front of each group of parents and switching over the camp.
Which in reality, you know, somebody's parent would talk to somebody and they'd be like, oh, well, that's where
You
my
would think
kid's at
so,
camp.
yeah.
Well, that's where my kid's at. And they would figure it out. But they don't here. So we have this great scene where Zach's dad comes in first and he basically puts him in a foxhole and makes him stay there.
Yeah. Makes it seem like he's under fire, and he's like, live action, we have live action activities today. Like, stay down, stay in your foxhole.
Yeah, and then the Broadway parents come in, and they hit the tail end of Annie.
Yeah, they basically go, well, you're just here in time to catch the end. And they're like, what? And they're like, yeah, it started at 9. And they're like, we thought it started at noon.
Yeah.
Which, of course, they did on purpose, right?
And then we have the fat camp where the parents are being forced to do leg lifts and aerobics.
By Christopher Lloyd in his Richard Simmons persona.
Richard Simmons outfit. But it's so great because you can tell, too, again, these parents are really out of touch with their kids, right?
Yeah.
So the Broadway parents don't care about their kids, just want to get rid of them.
Mm.
The fat camp parents, some of them are overweight themselves, but it's the kids' problem. We better make them work out, but they can't work out either.
Yeah.
Some of them can't lift their legs even.
Yeah.
And then we've got the computer camp where they're playing a video game pretending that they're hacking.
That they've hacked the Pentagon, and they're like, let's do a quick flyover. And the parents are like, they can't really have hacked the Pentagon. And then the jets fly over,
Yes.
which they know happens at that time of day. And the parents are like, what? And they're like, yeah, well, that's it, guys.
Yeah, it's so great. You're right. I forgot that gag happened, so it finally pays off.
So it looks like they've won the day.
But
Mr. Polk,
Yep.
the guy who's trying to hunt down Christopher Lloyd's character, as well as the sheriff, end up pulling in to investigate and running into Mud's parents.
right.
And the gig is up, as they say. And they find out.
Isn't it the jig is up?
I like gig, because that's like, this was their gig. It was an acting gig.
It's
and
the
their
jig. Like
is
they
up.
like they jiggery rigged the thing, and now the jig is up.
The gig is up
We'll
because
look it up, like, I can't.
because it's an acting gig. Okay?
Okay.
You say potato, I'll say potato.
I mean, they're not two different pronunciations. They're like two different words. But anyway, yeah, the jig or the gig is up, however you want to put it. And everybody has kind of figured out what's going on. They have to come clean. And of course, they blame Christopher Lloyd's character. They blame Dennis. And they want to take him in. And Mud's like, where's the money then? And they're like, where is the money? That's a good question. He goes, if he's in on it, then why is the money in my shoe?
Yeah.
And he takes out the wad of cash, and he's got all this money left over because he's been very frugally not spending it on crazy guitars and things.
Right.
And then they kind of explained to the parents that they all wanted to be kids and just have an enjoyable summer and have a little bit of freedom. And then everything's kind of resolved.
Yeah.
Right?
Mud uses the money that's left over to pay off the debt that Christopher Lloyd has.
For the car. Christopher Lloyd goes off with the doctor.
Yep.
Dumbest
doctor in the world.
I don't know how they're going to live their life because she seems like she's got it together, but whatever.
I don't, apparently not.
Apparently
I don't know
not.
how she's going to keep her medical license the way she makes decisions, but...
And then Zach goes home with Trish because his dad's still in a foxhole.
And they do a little making out.
No, they kiss.
No, his dad left. He jumped out of the foxhole. He's like, oh, interrogation's next. And his dad's like, well, I got a business meeting. I better get out of here.
So Zach goes with Trish. They kiss, and then she kisses Mud on the cheek. Gabby comes up and punches him and said, hey, only ex-geeks. And he's like, yeah. And then they do tongue kissing for a really
They go in.
long time.
Mud goes in for a kiss, and I'm like, oh, this is cute. And then Mud slings some tongue in there.
Like,
and I was like,
legitimately,
whoa!
you think that they're going to peck on the lips because they've been building up to it and they're friends. There is a full makeout scene that is longer than 45 seconds. And I'm telling you, that doesn't sound like a long time, but it is.
But when you're watching 14-year-olds do it, it is.
It is so awkward. Then we have kind of a tag at the end where Walter is swimming. There's still some of them at the camp. Walter's swimming. Betty comes up to him, and you're only seeing her shoulders and head above the water.
Yeah.
And she says, Walter, do you have the guts? And he goes, what? And she says, do you have the guts? And she holds up a swimsuit and, drops the swim bottoms. Yeah. And he goes, okay. And he puts his swimsuit on top of, a boogie board. And she goes, I guess you do have the guts, but you don't have an extra swimsuit. And she gets up, and she's just wearing a strapless bathing suit.
Yeah, and she takes his
and leaves him
naked in the pond.
That's the end. So it had a great ending, at least. What did other people think of it? How is it on Rotten Tomatoes?
So, Rotten Tomatoes, Camp Nowhere scored a 17.
Oh, no. 17% of critics gave it a good rating.
Yes.
That is sad.
Audience on Cinema Score gave it a B.
Okay.
Out of A through F. So that's not as bad.
Yeah.
Janet Maslin of the New York Times gave the film a positive review. She thought it could have been predictable and awful, but that it had a funny screenplay and good humored direction.
Okay.
And a nice young cast, which we said too. The cast was phenomenal.
Yeah, the cast was great.
She said that a lot of the cast had television experience, and they brought a sturdy, no-frills professionalism to their roles. The Washington Post gave it a positive review and said instead of the usual coming-of-age coarseness, this celebrated like kid power, kind of.
Yeah, it did, and you're right that it wasn't. He's right, at least, that it was not. It was not coarse, gross-out humor. Some of which we got in Camp Nowhere.
Yeah, it
really is kind of a gentle film.
The Austin Chronicle gave it 2 out of 5 stars, and this was one of the critical reviews. And the writer said, it depends mostly on Lloyd's crazy characters to hold the narrative together. And that works for a brief moment in the film, and that, like, no kid is going to buy into a movie that revolves around a geek who isn't a geek and a fat girl who isn't fat.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either.
So, yeah, you know, and I don't necessarily... I'm not as critical as the Austin Chronicle was, but I do believe, as I mentioned before, that I think Christopher Lloyd's comedy carried a lot of the movie.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think that's unfortunate. What I realized about this movie watching it this time, watching it again now, I did kind of ruin my childhood with it. Because it was not what I remember. And I feel like they had a very good premise. The part where he's going and the let's get the team together, where he's going to the different houses and stuff, that part was good, and it wasn't too long. It was like the first 15 minutes or so of the movie, maybe 20. The end part with the Parents' Day is brilliant.
Yes.
Right? It's the middle part that does nothing and literally goes nowhere.
Right.
Like,
and that's the part where they utilize a lot of Christopher Lloyd.
And they shouldn't
to keep it going.
They shouldn't have.
I mean, from like the characters he's playing, the getting stuck and walking through a car wash. It's a lot of physical comedy.
There's a lot of ridiculous antics.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that the movie would have been better if he had actually gone away in the middle, like he said he's going to. And maybe they bring him out for, like, the Mud Day thing.
Yeah.
And then they have to go to him and convince him to help with Parents' Day and do it all over again. Because the middle part, to me at least, I think that the middle part should have been these kids at camp. And what I would have liked to have seen, more character development, because the kids are good actors and they could have handled it. So, how does the bully actually, other than one scene with Allison Mack, how does he actually change now that he's out of that environment, now that they're with a smaller group where there's 20 kids instead of a school of 200?
Right.
And there's no parental influence. How does he develop some actual leadership skills and some kind, and let his kindness show? The popular girl Trish, we don't see her change much at all. And I would love to see her interacting with, like, again, Allison Mack's character is like a little sister. Jessica Alba's character could have been a little sister to her. And then she ends up caring about somebody where at school she doesn't care about anybody but herself. Right? The girl who is fat finds self-esteem. Like, they could have all had character arcs. And there are other movies featuring camp. I think maybe, if I'm remembering Heavyweights right, the other one... There's, like, even, like, Parent Trap. They have a long part of that movie takes place at camp. And it's all about the kids. And I didn't like that they brought Christopher Lloyd in.
They could have also gone in a really darker way of, like, a very much a Lord of the Flies kind of situation.
Yeah.
Where you have kids unsupervised for 8 weeks, for the most part. And as we know from that novel, right, society breaks down. And we could see the kids not listening to anybody. For the most part, they all listen to Mud.
Yeah,
kind of. Zach,
yeah.
Right? I mean, there's a couple times where, like, they take their money and buy toys, but it's a goofy thing.
Right.
There really still is a hierarchy here, and nobody's hurting anyone. Everyone's having a fun time, even when they're bored.
Yeah, and even the injury that happens, it's a very minor. He has a burn.
Yeah, but that's really only a reason just for Christopher Lloyd to meet the doctor.
Yeah, they didn't have to go, like, super dark, but they could have, like, had a moment where these kids are just messing around. Somebody breaks their arm, and maybe then step in, take them to the doctor. But then they're like, hey, we should maybe have some rules around here. And then they all start behaving a little bit more
And they start all becoming responsible and figuring out how difficult it is to be in a responsible role.
And how difficult it is to keep yourself entertained for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I thought, other than the one scene where they're bored for a little bit when it's raining, that's totally unrealistic because there's only so many times you could go to the beach. There's only so many Nerf ball games you can have.
I liked the actress that played the doctor, but the doctor was 100% unnecessary.
Yeah, completely.
Right? If, like we said before, Christopher Lloyd had less time in this,
there
was not even a need for him to have a love interest.
No, what would have been funny to me would have been they get bored and they start doing some of the activities they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
The girls decide to put on some skits.
Right.
One of the boys decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to teach you, maybe not the cello because I hate it, but I'll teach you how to play the guitar. Mm-hmm. Mud is like, I kind of do like computers. We see the twins playing video games, right? But I think that would have been funny. Or maybe Mud is like, hey, I want to learn guitar.
Yeah, and maybe they teach each other stuff.
And they teach each other. There's so many possibilities here that were kind of wasted to me.
So that we've talked a little bit about the response the critics had. And
a little bit of ours. What's your rating?
What's the rating? So out of pine trees.
Right, I forgot.
10 pine trees. I'm going to give it, I'm not impressed.
I know.
Right? I wanted to like the movie. And I was going to go actually real low. But the cast and Christopher Lloyd brought it up for me a bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it 5 pine trees.
Yeah, I'm about the same spot. And I always, when we watch something, I kind of have in my mind before going in, I like to kind of say, what do I, based on my childhood memory, what do I think I'm going to rate this? And I thought that this was going to be like an 8. I thought it was going to be, I gave a higher rating to Troop Beverly Hills, where we do see some of the development of the girls, still not focused on Shelley Long.
Right.
But we do see some of the girls and how they interact at camp and in Scouts. That is like a guilty pleasure movie that I would watch again.
Right.
I don't know that I would watch this again. It was really slow in the middle. I do think that the characters are interesting. I just don't think they had enough to do.
Right.
So I'm going to go with a 6.
Okay, so I'm at a 5, you're at a 6. Yeah, and I would say, does this ruin their childhood? It kind of does for me. Not that it ruins my childhood, but there's a disconnect. And this is why. As someone like we both have a lot of summer camp experience, right?
Yeah.
At watching this movie, and I would have done this, I think, as a kid, too. I watched this movie and said, oh, it's a summer camp movie written by someone who never really went to summer camp.
Yes.
It's written by, this is what I think summer camp is supposed to be.
You're right. And ultimately, this makes me want to watch the movie I almost picked for this week, which was Indian Summer.
Okay.
That movie is about 7 friends who were at camp in 1970s. And then they go back in the 1990s as like almost a camp reunion kind of thing.
Okay.
It's a little bit like The Big Chill, but they have, and even though I'm getting like goosebumps thinking about it, it's such a good movie. I didn't pick it because I didn't think anybody else would know it for the podcast. But I highly recommend watching that because if you did go to camp, that movie to me has the nostalgia of camp, especially from adult looking back on what you were like as a kid and what that freedom of being at camp, what that was actually like.
Well, don't go too much into it because maybe we'll do it in the future.
Maybe. Hopefully.
So total, together... Yeah! 5.5 pine trees out of 10.
5.5 pine trees for Camp Nowhere. 2.5 pine trees for gummy worms. We're kind of in the middle on both.
Yeah.
Meh. Last time, at least, we had a good snack. This time, we kind of...
It wasn't bad. It just wasn't, phenomenal.
And now we're coming to a show that I know our listeners probably watch, but I don't care for. So, that brings us to... What is Steve willing to watch?
Okay.
All right.
I've prepped myself for this pain.
All right. So... we have a cycle on this show. We just did My Little Pony for our cartoon, Salute Your Shorts for our TV show, Camp Nowhere for our movie. We also had a bonus in there, Double Dare, which was a listener suggestion. Mm-hmm. Coming up, our news cycle, we have Scooby-Doo, and then, to celebrate back to school, we have Reading Rainbow and After School Specials.
Okay.
And then, so that's going to be our news cycle.
Our news cycle, yep.
Our news cycle. So, because of that, you get to pick some episodes of Scooby-Doo.
All right.
I know, I want to say, we are aware that this is not from the 80s or 90s, but it kind of is.
Yeah, it was in the 60s, right? 60s and 70s.
Yeah, it started in 69.
Yeah, but it was always on TV in the 80s.
Yeah, and there are other iterations of it. Just because of what we can find and what we can't find at the moment, we decided to just do, this is the original cartoon.
Original Scooby-Doo.
A different time, we'll do like Scrappy-Doo. Yeah. And the New Adventures of Scooby-Doo. And maybe at some point it's hitting the very tail end. We might do the live action film. But for right now, we're just doing the original cartoon. Yeah. So, I'm just going to read you some. I picked the pilot, or what I think is the pilot. Mm-hmm. From what I can tell, this is on Tubi. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, season 2, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 all in a row.
Okay.
You ready? Episode 1, Nowhere to Hide. HYDE.
Okay.
Like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think the titles say enough.
Yep. Just give me the titles.
Episode 2, Mystery Mask Mix-Up. Episode 3, Jeepers, it's the Creeper.
Okay, I like your voice.
Episode 4, Scooby's Night with a Frozen Fright. Episode 5, Haunted House Hang-Up. Or Episode 6, A Tiki Scare is No Fair.
I think I have to go with the Hide.
Okay.
Nowhere to Hide, HYDE.
So it's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of theme.
Yep.
The gang tracks a jewel thief to the house of inventor Dr. Jekyll.
Awesome.
So we'll be watching that. I really wanted the one with the Harlem Globetrotters, and if we can find
That's a special, I think, though, right?
It's a special. I don't know whether it's on here or not. So we'll take a look for it if we can find it. Even part of it, I just find it hilarious. And, yeah, that's it for us. So we had, I would say, maybe skip Camp Nowhere.
You know, we gave it a 5.5, so I mean, if you're bored and you don't have anything to do, it's better than a stick in the eye, but I mean, it's not.
Or if you remember it differently and you think we're wrong, let us know. You can do that mostly on our Facebook page. A lot of interaction there. A lot of people private message us, but just put it on the page. It's fine. You can do that. And, don't forget, please, it really helps us to be seen when you leave a review. If you don't like the show, don't. But if you're enjoying the show, rate and review. It really helps us to be seen by other people who might also enjoy it. So that's it for me. I'm Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Have a great week, everybody. This podcast is supported by its creators
and listeners like you.
Help keep our show ad-free by visiting our website, stopruiningmychildhood.com.
There you can find links to our social media.
And this very podcast you're currently listening to.
Both Megan and I are authors, and you can find links to our books on our About page.
And on our Watch With Us page, you can find videos and links for all the shows and movies we discuss on the podcast.
And more importantly, links to buy the nostalgic snacks we review as well.
We also post bonus content about once a month.
So like, subscribe, and follow.
For a small independent podcast like ours, it really does make a difference.